There are swear words, quite a few, so just so you know if you want to take your kids for a walk. Okay, Michael.
That's what I've been waiting for.
What follows is a tale of my friendship with Michael, which spans 56 years. All of the stories are totally true, but some might be slight exaggerations or unintentional inaccuracies. I met Michael at a Boy Scout camp where we worked together for 2 summers. We preferred to be cabin counselors as opposed to being activity specialists because we wanted a variety of activities and a feeling of unity and togetherness that comes with being immersed in a cabin group. It's also possible that we had no choice but to be cabin counselors because neither of us were particularly skilled in any athletic or creative activities. As an aside, Michael did eventually excel in one sport. No, it was not hockey, baseball, or basketball. It was cross-country skiing, which in my view was downhill skiing without any of the thrill, speed, or fun. Michael had so much stamina in this sports that Shotzi declared him to be Shotzi's all-time physical hero. Eventually, Shotzi reluctantly stripped Michael of that title, due at least partly to Michael's incompetency in hockey and basketball. Michael, being the kind and generous human being that he was an equal opportunity passer in basketball. There was always a 50% chance that a pass from Michael would go to a member of the opposite team. This is despite or on account of Michael's attempt to disguise his passes by looking straight ahead with a bored gaze and open mouth, so you didn't know he was going to pass it. Can you do it? Michael was the most gentle, open-minded, non-judgmental, optimistic, and loving soul I had ever met. He even loved nature's pests like mosquitoes and rabid chipmunks. Michael had to get a series of painful rabies shots in his abdomen after a chipmunk bit him. A few days later, he seemed to have forgotten the incident and tried to humanely catch another chipmunk running amok in the cabin. This is true. Michael was and still is the only person I know that actually enjoys watching mosquitoes suck his blood. In contrast, I hated bugs so much that I showed up on the first day of pre-camp, where I was a complete newcomer, wearing a bee head protector with netting covering my face and head. Michael and I were and still are opposites in many ways. I lusted over fair-skinned, sunbeam white bread blondes, while he preferred dark, earthy, Mediterranean-looking women. Unlike Michael, I was intense, brash, cynical, judgmental, and boisterous. I spent my undergrad hours at York in labs, faking acid titrations or comparing the anuses of different species of worms. He was an artsy poo, skipping classes and hanging around the common room, socializing and playing cards. Our dog walking styles are also opposite. Even when he's not walking his dog, Michael usually goes out of his way to greet and eventually hug complete strangers. I go out of my way to avoid eye contact with other dog walkers. Do I have to say hi? If a person comments on how cute my dog is, do I have to tell them what a mieskite their dog is? Can I avoid any response at all because I don't really give a shit about their dog? Do I have to remember how old my dog is when asked, even though I can't even remember how old my kids are? After all, the ages of kids and dogs keep changing every year or so. Michael's optimism and acceptance of authority have not always worked well for him. Getting back to our camp days. When the staff in our section went on an overnight camping trip to bond the day before the kids were to arrive, swarms of sandflies came out in the early evening once the wind died down. I immediately put on my mosquito head covering and buried myself in my sleeping bag. Eventually, everyone crawled into their sleeping bags. We could not escape the incessant buzzing. Several times as the evening progressed, I yelled out to the section head, "Barry, let's go back. What's the point in staying when no one is having fun?" Barry replied, "Shut the fuck up, Landau." At around 2 a.m., I led a mutiny with fellow followers. Michael was not among them. We snuck out hiked back to camp, and slept comfortably in our cabins. At around 6 a.m., the section head and his loyalists returned to camp, sleep deprived, faces covered in bites, and eyes swollen closed. Barry called an urgent meeting in the director's cabin that morning. I expected to be fired before the camper buses even arrived, or at least be demoted to kitchen or maintenance staff. To everyone's surprise, the director praised the mutineers and scolded the section head for his bad judgment. This is also true. Michael and I eventually taught together at USDS. He was actually hired to join me in the science department, even though he didn't have any credentials, other than being a male, a teacher, and kind of Jewish. Actually, other than having Jewish parents, Michael had no Jewish or Hebrew credentials. He didn't even suffer through years of Hebrew school or shul like my other friends and I did. Michael tried to learn Jewish culture and language as quickly as possible in order to fit in, but it was not a smooth journey. He slaughtered both Yiddish and Hebrew. For example, he kept confusing the words kiddush and kaddish. And he forgot that you aren't allowed to have butter on your rye bread and a corned beef sandwich, or order it with a glass of milk when going to Panzer's Deli. A few years before meeting Nancy, Michael moved out of his place. Was it with Harold and Ken? Who were you living with before you lived with me?
With Ken.
With Ken. And asked if he could move in with me for several weeks. I was delighted. He ended up staying for what? How long did you stay? 2 or 3 years or so before getting together with Nancy. Nancy has taught Michael the art of gradually replacing tasty, rich, greasy, meaty, gluttonous foods with bland, healthy, environmental friendly, quinoa and lentil-based, overpriced health food store alternatives. However, when Michael, Shotzi, and I go on our annual Montreal trip, he resorts to more natural states and wolves down the steak and fries at a rate we can't compete with. Someone asked me if Michael ever gets angry. I've been told that he does, but I don't recall him ever showing more than frustration with me. On the other hand, I've gotten angry at Michael on numerous occasions. Like when I was a camp director and he was the section head, he decided to leave camp without telling anybody as an introduction to a special color war event where the kids were told that their section head was kidnapped. And all the kids, of course, wrote home about this. There was a time when Michael almost killed me by leaving a memo spike standing upright on my chair at the final Camp of Staff banquet. He was using it as a tool to extract meat from a lobster claw. According to Isser, I was a few inches from actually that being my final banquet when I sat down on the spike and felt a burning sensation up my rectum.
Damn near killed me.
On another occasion, when I finally discovered that Michael was not merely a placebo, when I discovered that marijuana was not merely a placebo, I was livid with him for not trying harder to encourage me to be more open. After all, I would have done that for him if the situation was reversed. But pushing people is not Michael's gentle Rogerian style. Often when I get angry with Michael, it's because he arrived late. Sometimes hours, occasionally days or weeks, or not at all. I scolded him constantly about his disorganization and procrastination. At my suggestion, Michael decided to work on his procrastination, and after a year or two, he actually bought a book and started to read the introduction. I recall walking into the room with Shotzi and finding Michael asleep on his back with the book covering his face. The title of the book was clearly visible and read something like, "Finally, a surefire method to conquer procrastination once and for all." Michael, to make a long story not so short, you've enriched my life in countless ways. I love you like a brother, cherish our friendship.